Final half hour. And that means one thing. That means we go to Seattle. How many shows do you know can go from Atlanta to Peru to Seattle? I think the answer to that is one. And this means we bring in our buddy Niko Moreno from Pulso Sports and the Soccer Bar. As always, my friend, good to see you. Good to have you hanging out here for the final half hour. And this is where we get to talk to you about stuff. That's the official term. What cup of coffee are you on, by the way?
This is cup number 2 of Joe. Just starting off the morning nice and easy, coasting today. Just excited to be on as always with you, John. We had a lot of movement yesterday in the city of Seattle. A lot of news. Craig Waibel was nice enough to provide us with a whole lot of things to talk about today. So it's definitely been it was an interesting Wednesday, to say the least.
No doubt about it. That's why I wanted to break it all down with you and get the lowdown, the lay down, and what's going on. So, what we talked about, officially official. It is now folks going from Dallas to Seattle. Garber Bucks, international slot player heading to Dallas. What has been the official vibe now that the Jesus Ferreira deal is doner than done, and now he's a part of things in Seattle?
Yeah, look, it's interesting because from a national standpoint, from fans of other clubs, as usual, I guess, the move for Ferreira has been praised upon. And, there's a lot of even pundits that believe this was a great move for Seattle, the whole package deal in order to get a guy like Ferreira that has so much potential at his age, that's as versatile, to give Seattle all kinds of possibilities in terms of how they're going to include Ferreira into this attacking third. So that part's been interesting, how from people outside of Seattle, outside of the region, has been very high regarded, that move for Ferreira here in Seattle. And understandably so from certain people. It's been seen a little bit as an underwhelming move, especially after Craig Waibel was very clear that this is the big signing of 2025, that we are set when it comes to DPs for the rest of the year. Now, if you are part of this show, if you're part of this audience, you've heard from me that was going to be the case. So you guys are not surprised today, but a lot of people were, that in one way or another, there's not going to be any more big signings per se, right? There's a U22. There's actually 2 U22 spots that could potentially be used. I think that Craig Waibel referred himself to one, and there could be something done with that U22. But in terms of what people are feeling in regards to the move, it's been 50-50, if not 60-40, in terms of it's a good move, 60, and it's a bad move, 40. I stand on the grounds that with everything that Craig shared yesterday, including the fact that Jordan Morris 2 years ago talked to the team and apparently in a pretty serious conversation said, hey, man, I need to be a DP. And the way that Craig was able to manage that situation was by saying, look, we're going to put some goals, some metrics in your contract. And if you meet these metrics, then you're going to be able to be a DP. It's going to raise your threshold of pay to being a DP. And that's why he's a DP next year. So with that in mind, you have to applaud the fact that they were able to get a guy like Ferreira on a non-DP deal, and they are better today than they were in 2024. That's simple.
Underwhelming? Folks think that this is an underwhelming deal.
Yeah.
On that 40%.
Yeah, I would think that 40% at the lowest, to be honest, are underwhelmed. And I've yet to respond to certain comments from, very loyal fan base. And they have every right to inquire and to have their own thoughts. And that's their prerogative, right? If they want to hold the club to a certain standard, then, that is totally okay with me. But underwhelming is a tough word for me to kind of understand, right? Because Ferreira, again, is a guy that has a lot of potential, man. That, I mean, if this move was made 2 years ago, away from injuries and away from a club that was just a mess, you'd think that people would be more excited, but that's just not the case right now. And look, you look across the league, and I think this is part of it, John. Whenever you look at Austin paying $10 million for Brandon Vasquez, and you see players like Cucho Hernandez and Denise Buanga, and what LA Galaxy was able to do last year with Paintsol and Peck, then you put yourself in that mindset where, like, man, what if the Sounders were to get this type of players? And that's all good and well. But this Sounders team was the exact same team that it wasn't easy, it wasn't ideal, but they did beat LAFC in the semifinals of the Western Conference. They did play a tough match against LA Galaxy and were very close to holding on to that game, maybe taking it to overtime. I'm not going to say that they were close to beating LA Galaxy, but they fought. They were in it. So now they're a little bit better. People were like, well, if they would have had certain type of players, well, now you have that, because that's what Ferreira brings, is another guy that's going to be a quality player that can do a lot, that he is a goal scorer, that he can create opportunities, whether he plays out wide, whether he plays behind the nine, whether he plays at the nine. I mean, he does bring a certain level of talent. So you're kind of checking in the boxes of what you really needed, but people still want that big time player, that European. You got people lying about Rashford coming to Seattle, and so people hold on to those strings, and they're like, oh, can it happen? It will not happen, by the way. And so that's the reason why people feel like this is underwhelming, because they want that big boom, that big splash. But sometimes the splashiness is not necessary. Look, people here are obsessed with the word ambitious. And Seattle has never been an overly ambitious team. They've always been a team that goes in the sense of, how can we have sustainable talent? How can we be conservative? How can we make sure that we are always successful year after year? And we built off of that. And that's okay. That's been the formula for success, the formula for trophies in the past. So why move along from that? I don't see a reason to.
But sometimes, and I think that sometimes when you think of a big splash, when you put a splash in the pool, you don't have to have a cannonball off of the 10 meter. You don't have to be off of the high dive. You don't have to do a cannonball. It can be a can opener. It can be a swan dive. It's just the fact that you're making the dive in the pool and hitting the water the right way.
100%. And that's exactly why, look, as long as you're not inactive in the transfer window and not doing anything to better the team, then everyone should be okay. Especially when I go back to last season, where the team was able to get results. It wasn't amazing soccer, but they were able to get results. So I thought Craig Waibel said it perfectly. He said, look, my job is to do and make this team better with the resources that I have. And look, as much heat as people throw onto Craig Waibel, he doesn't have the big open checkbook like Atlanta does, or Miami does, or the type of budget that Austin is showing you this season, or Columbus. He doesn't have that, so he has to be able to move around and use those resources. Now, the whole thing with Jordan Morris, this Sounders team has needed Jordan Morris. So if 2 years ago putting these metrics was the only way that Jordan would stay, you had to do it. You had to do it. And look, what I've understood is that obviously you put those metrics with him as a winger, and it was probably a lot harder to get those metrics than when you moved them at the nine. So, you kind of put yourself in a bad situation there. But again, that was the only way you were going to be able to keep this player. That Jordan might not be a Golden Boot contender every year, but he is Seattle's Golden Boot guy. He's the guy that's been providing the goals. So you needed him. Now, has there been room at times for Seattle to do a little bit more, to maybe go after it and maybe be a little bit more ambitious? Sure. That Raul Ruidíaz situation was mishandled. If you knew that he wasn't going to be the guy, could you have moved him? Could you have bought him out and gone out there and got yourself another DP? Absolutely. But if you don't have the transfer budget, you're not going to put yourself in that situation, John. You're just simply not going to do it. I'm not going to get rid of Raul Ruidiaz if I don't have the money to go and get myself a top DP player. So that's kind of what people need to understand when it comes to Craig Waibel. He has a job to do, but he also has a budget that he has to manage. I don't think, John, that if somebody was to be like, here, John, I'm gonna give you $100,000 to make your show better, you'd be like, nah, I don't need the 100 grand. I'll do it what I have. I mean, you're not gonna do that, right? You're gonna use that money. But if you don't got the money, you're gonna just do a great job doing what you're doing, right? With what you have. That's what Craig Waibel's doing. It's very simple.
So then, who gets more credit for thinking this way, playing this 3D Klingon chess here, where Jordan Morris is like, "Tell you what, I'll give you 2 years, and then I need to be a DP." Who gets full credit here for thinking this far outside the box? Is it Weibel? Is it Morris? Or is it both?
I think it's Morris. I think it's Morris. And Craig said it. Look, I'm happy that I have a guy like Jordan Morris coming into my office and saying, hey, I deserve to be a DP. And then 2 years later, he's like, see, I proved to you guys that I did deserve to be a DP because I did meet those metrics. So it's definitely full credit to Jordan Morris. That again, for all the heat that he gets in some ways, he has been responding with some statistics. And does he have room to get better? Absolutely. Is he the ultimate nine? No, but he is a great soccer player that has proven to be an important part of this team. And I think with Ferreira, he gets some help. He gets the help that he needed to take some of that pressure up top, to have another guy to associate with, that can possibly amplify what he did last season. So I think that there is a lot of belief on my end to think that he's going to have, if not the same type of season, a better season in 2025. And that those are DP numbers. I mean, look at the numbers he had last season. Those are DP time numbers. I know some DPs that have come to this league and been atrocious. Copetti, one of them, right? I mean, Rigoni. I mean, I could go all day just naming certain DPs that just have not played out. Jordan Morris, you're giving him a DP, yes, at 30, yes, with some injury concerns because he has 2 surgeries on his knees, but he has proven he has earned it, and that's all right with me. I mean, again, it's okay with me because of how we played out. Is that ideal for you to use that money there? That's not here nor there because, again, if there's no transfer budget to go and get better players, you got to kind of play with what you have. Same reason why Albert was brought back. And again, we don't need to go too much into it because me and you have had the discussion already because we knew what was happening, right? I reported that early. I reported the JP situation, or I reported the Albert early, and we were able to talk about that. Albert needed to be back because you didn't want to go out there and have to spend on a transfer fee, on a new salary, have to figure out if the guy was going to adapt. So you keep Albert, and now you give him a multi-year contract at a DP level per Craig Waibel yesterday. You go out there and get JP, where Craig said it was one of the most important moves for me this season. And people downplay that need or that move. But look, if JP at his age can go back to being close to that MVP finalist in MLS that he was at one point, with his grit, his experience, his leadership, I think that's a big piece. And again, we talked about this last week when people were surprised yesterday. Craig talked about moving Josh Atencio to center back and playing him there and experimenting with him there and moving around those pieces. And that makes JP's move even more important. So I think that there is a lot of coherency on the way that the roster is being built. Is it amazing? Is it, like the lights of Hollywood? And yeah, oh my God, this is an amazing roster. No, but it doesn't have to be because it's sustainable, because it's proven. And as I've been saying, the floor has risen. And so the bare minimum, the very worst game that Seattle would have in 2025, in my opinion, will be better than the worst game that they've had in 2024. And that alone is a good thing for any club.
Let me ask you an FC Dallas question for a second, but it's more philosophical than it is about roster makeup and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So FCD develops all of these players. They develop, a Ricardo Pepi. Then they sell him on. Then, mercifully, they finally do invest, and they bring in Alan Velasco, and it looks like Velasco might be on his way out the door. Same now with a Jesus Ferreira. You build, you bring a player like a Jesus Ferreira through the academy. Then you get to a point to where you move him on. When it comes to FC Dallas, it seems like players hit a development ceiling. It's like they hit a ceiling, and then they're moved on, and then they get better and better and better. I mean, Ricardo Pepi, like I said, you get Pepi to a point, plays at Dallas, you move him overseas, and you see what's going on with Ricardo Pepi. Jesus Ferreira, it seems like you're getting to a ceiling with Ferreira. You move him on, and I know the expectation in Seattle is that he goes off and he hits a spaceship and he goes off into the stratosphere. What is it about FC Dallas? And like I said, I mean, this could be just the whole development aspect of it, and then sitting there and seeing, okay, we probably need to move on from this guy because we can't afford him anymore. But what is it about FC Dallas where it's like these players hit a point and then they feel like they have to move them on, and then they get better after they move them on? I mean, is there something there to that?
I think you're absolutely onto something, and I don't know if is a misidentity or misability to understand what the club is about. There was a point where Dallas, their job was to get their best young players were going to go to Europe, and Chris Richards and uh, Tessman and all of these guys that came up through Dallas. If they were good, they were going to move on to Europe, and that's okay. That's one way. That's one form that you're going to get your club at a certain level, and you have to be able to occupy those places, those spots with other players to keep your club uh, successful and competitive with MLS.
Yeah.
But there was a point where either in between the reality of we don't really have enough talent. We got to go and buy the Velascos. We got to go and buy the I forget the name of the striker that they bought from Liga MX that didn't work out here.
Yeah.
They started making all these moves that just weren't working for them, and then there became some desperation where they stopped caring about the product that they had developed that was working for the team. And I'll give you two. Paxton Pamico, he's a guy that we thought that he was going to be this amazing player and never flourished into that. And Ferreira, a guy that had all the potential, that was supposed to go to Europe, that was supposed to be amazing, and he started to downgrade and started to fall back from that initial overall potential. And there were 2 years where between a poor performance as a team, as a collective, and some injuries, you kind of lost that. So I think that there is some identity issues from Dallas, and that's why today you have this fire sale where Jaramendi's gone, and Areola probably gone, and Ferreira's gone, and now Velasco's going to be gone. So now you're kind of just tearing it all apart to rebuild it because it's been falling off for the past 3 or 4 seasons. I go back to Lucci. That is something that I think that Dallas messed up on. He was a guy that could have easily helped you not allow all these foundations to fall apart, and you didn't take care of that. And that's why you're in a position now where you're, again, breaking it all up, putting the bulldozer through it, and trying to figure out who you are. Because in my opinion, Dallas has a strong problem with identifying what the club idea and identity is. Philosophy wise, to me, they're confused, and that has reflected in poor MLS play, in lack of players finalizing their end product, and even their young talent stop leaving to this potentially important teams in Europe.
Yeah, because I was just something that popped into my head, and I was like, hey, wait a minute here. You got players that are hitting a ceiling, and the fact that you brought in Richards and Tessman and Pomacall as a part of the discussion too, I think that it goes to a deeper issue, deeper than I had initially thought. But it was just recently I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, you have these two big names and all of this promise that's attached to them. You get them to a point, then you move them on, and then they go through the stratosphere, specifically Pepe, obviously, with what he's doing overseas. And it was just something that stuck in my head, and I felt like I had to ask about it to see if I was barking up the right tree or not.
No, there's a problem in Dallas, and the player I was thinking about was Franco Jara. They brought in from Liga MX.
Yeah.
He was a guy that was proven, was a bust here. You can go back to Hader O'Brien, El Soldado, where he was in Dallas. He did okay, and in Austin, he's a guy that's been an important player. So there is an issue internally with Dallas, and I think it has to do with an identity crisis and an infrastructure that has either fallen apart or has proven to have been built incorrectly. And that's why, in my opinion, you have a rebuild in Dallas at this point in time.
Okay. Atlanta United yesterday announced that they were bringing in Cayman Togashi, who played Japanese League, League One, a longtime veteran there, grew up in New York City, born in New York City, raised in Japan, played in Japan, and is being brought in on a free to be depth at the striker position for Atlanta United. So Chris Henderson, Garth Lagerwey, they bring in Togashi-san to be a part of the roster in 25. And it is something where Garth Lagerwey and Chris Henderson go into the Japanese market to bring in a player to help out depth because of the schedules that we anticipate for Major League Soccer teams in 2025 and beyond. When it comes to going into the Japanese marketplace, they mentioned that it was something that they did in Seattle. They kept an eye on the Far Eastern market and the Far Eastern clubs and things like that. For those that might not understand what Chris Henderson and Garth Lagerwey were looking at in the Japanese marketplace, can you explain they're looking at the Far East as a marketplace to bring players in and what you were able to witness with that?
Absolutely. In this conversation that I've had both with Gard and Chris, and it's interesting how, as a league, MLS knows where the league is saturating a certain market. South America right now is being saturated, right? That does two things. It creates a lot of teams fighting over the same type of players. It creates an inflation in prices, which ultimately makes you overpay for certain players. So when you're talking about a 31-year-old attacker, right, in Togashi, maybe a 31-year-old player with that same profile, those same similar statistics, was going to cost you a little more because you're in a saturated market in Ecuador, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, right? Because that's where all the MLS teams. So the way that Chris Henderson and Garth do is that they'll flip it. They'll go away from where everybody's at, and they're going to go and find those same profile type players in a market that no one would expect. That can create a little bit of doubtfulness from people. And I was one of them when they were here, when I criticized when they brought Kim Ki-hee, and he on a free, completely on a free. And I was like, wow, what are they doing? This guy was cut from that team. I don't understand the move. I don't get it. And then all of a sudden, Kim Ki-hee comes in, and he's a fantastic player. And he has the same profile that maybe I was looking at center backs in South America. This player had, and he was unbelievable. He helped be this team successful when he was here. He was a constant contributor. Gustav Svensson, similar, older player from Scandinavia, and a player that maybe is not overly regarded, or a league that wasn't overly regarded, and people weren't really looking at. He comes in, he becomes a leader. He's a guy that helps this team get a lot of wings, get successful, get that those titles that Seattle fights for. So that's what Chris and Garth do, is completely get away from where all the MLS teams are looking at and find those diamonds in the rough, whether it's two things: bringing in a player that's going to be a role player and a player that's going to be part of my system, that's going to work out. That again, maybe they're not going to be in MLS All-Star 11, but they're going to be a star for my team, and they're going to be part of what our identity and in our game model is going to be. And that's why I think you bring in a guy like Togashi at that age on a free, is because there's other moves that are going to be brewing, right? So if I'm already thinking I'm going to be spending a lot of money on two players, because I think that's what's going to happen in Atlanta, then I need to make sure that I get all those co-stellar players that are going to be either my depth or they're going to be helping me bring in to help these top players. Because when it comes to MLS, especially in 2025, depth is going to be important. So to me, looking at this type of signing, it has Garth and Chris written all over it. It makes a whole lot of sense. And he's likely going to be a player that's going to end up turning your head once he gets on the field. Because if Chris is bringing him on and if Garth is bringing him on, there's something to this player. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I know him. No idea. I haven't followed him. I've looked at some of his highlights. That's about it. But I know that they have deeply looked at this guy. This is not just some random dude that popped up on their radar or that they looked at while playing FIFA. This is a guy that they've been scouting for a long time, decided that was worth the risk, and perhaps has a chip on his shoulder the same way many players do, and they're going to exploit that to make a successful roster in Atlanta.
Because, random dude, we all know that random dude is going to come in and make an absolute impact for every roster in Major League Soccer. We know this for an absolute fact. Random dude. That's what you're chasing after. What's going on with Pulso Sports on the Soccer Bar, my friend?
Yes. Two things there. Pulso Sport, we're going to have tomorrow our first real Let It Out Friday. We had some technical issues last week. We're going to be able to get on it tomorrow. When it comes to Soccer Bar, we are in the mix of seeing where the project goes. We just found out that one of our producers is getting a opportunity abroad, so he will be leaving the States, and therefore we are trying to figure out if Soccer Bar will continue. If not, I will definitely be looking into embarking another project on my own and trying to figure out if I can get a team together, because I do like having that Spanish focused show during the weekday that just focuses on all things MLS. So we're right now on a standby there with Soccer Bar. But again, whether it's one way or another, I will get a show on for Spanish speakers. So please stay tuned. Do not leave. Do help me out by joining Pulso Sports. We're going to have a lot of interesting things this season that we're going to be moving around. We are going to get a little bit more of a weekly show for the Northwest. I want to focus a lot on Timbers, Whitecaps, and Sounders. So I'm going to try to get a team together to put a show there for that. But we're in the mix of figuring out 2025 so far. Stay tuned, though. I will not let you down if you go ahead and subscribe to that Pulso Sport channel. Of course, we always have the rerun of Thursdays with Niko, which I appreciate so much. SDH allowing us to do. It's a big thing for us. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from your show, so we really appreciate that. So stay tuned, help us out, and thanks, Jon, as always.
As always, my friend, it's great to catch up with you, whether it's on your first, your second, or your third cup of coffee. No matter what the mug says, it's always great to see you, my friend. We will catch up with you again next week. Be safe, stay warm, stay dry, and as always, much love from the east to the Pacific Northwest. We'll catch up with you next week, because we did get into the Vancouver ownership situation a little bit this morning, because I'm on some Canadian programming occasionally as a pundit, and people are freaking out about the Whitecaps and their future.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, I think should. We can touch on that next week if you want.
You got it, brother. We will do that. Be safe, get some breakfast, and love you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right, there it goes. And it's always great to catch up with Niko and find out what's going on with Niko Moreno and our friend at Pulso Sports. And always you can catch on Niko's social media What I try to do when I remember to do it in a timely manner is I take our segment and I flip it and give it to Niko. And so you get to watch our discussion about what's going on in the Pacific Northwest. We've always thought it was important to address what's going on in the Western Conference just as much as it is in the Eastern Conference. And so when we can bring in folks like Niko on a weekly basis to do the deep dives into the Western Conference and find out what's going on in Seattle because they're a perennial power and understand what's going on with basically Sounders East now, with Chris Henderson here, with Garth here, with Tenny here working in strength and conditioning. You get the background, and so that way, when you get the background and you can apply it to what's going on here in Atlanta, we've always thought that that was vital as a part of the learning process and the understanding about what's going on. And when I got to ask, I wanted to ask this morning specifically about the Far Eastern market involved in the deal involving Togashi coming from the Japanese league, the J1 league, and coming over here to get an understanding about trying to go into those. And we saw this with the distressed assets. So if you look at, say, distressed assets like we've seen in the past, looking at Ligue 2 and looking at the French marketplace and things like that, you're always trying to find those other locations. You're zigging while everybody else is zagging. And so when you can go into the Far Eastern marketplace and get somebody like a Cayman Togashi, I wanted to ask Niko about the background there, about zigging while everybody else is zagging and finding folks that you think will fit. And it had slipped my mind about Kim Ki-hee. Legitimately, it had slipped my mind about Kim Ki-hee and Gustav Svensson. Going to the Scandinavian market, going to the Far East and finding a Kim Ki-hee, which really helped out Seattle. And so when Niko got to break that information down, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember that now. And so to be able to have those kinds of conversations with him, I've always thought that it was important, A, to understand what's going on in the Western Conference during the regular season, and B, to understand a little further the process for Garth and Chris in the front office. And so to be able to have Niko and to be able to pick his brain about these kinds of things, I've always thought it was really, really cool that he puts up with and specifically mine, silly questions when it comes to what's going on.